It has been traumatic for all of us over the last couple of years, and it has changed the way we do business, not just transactionally speaking, but how we bring our employees into the fold and try to keep them healthy. Lee Richardson has been studying the brain for 30 years to try to figure out it's mental health, but it's more than that. Lee, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
But what prompted this, I found to be a little bit, I don't know if it's apples and oranges, but it was to an extent a traumatic brain injury that your son suffered, right?
Absolutely. That's what made me.
Well, what happened?
Forced me. Well, he was in second grade and he got hit by a car, and we were blessed. We got through it until he got to fifth grade. And then he came to me and he said, "Mom, my brain just doesn't work anymore. You've got to help me." So I did. And what I've learned about the brain since then is amazing. And, four things put a brain in a dysregulated state: genetics, physical head trauma, emotional trauma, and stress. And think about the last 2 years. I don't know about you, but I met stress in a whole different way.
So when you started to study the brain, it was a physical thing. You're looking at what different areas of the brain and what produces what reaction. How did you go about it, or what did you learn?
Well, how I started is I found that when I went to the school and talked to the counselor about how I could help my son, I was told to put him on speed, which I didn't want to do. And when I asked why would I do that, the response was, well, that's the only thing you can do. So I started doing some research. And I learned about neurofeedback, and it's a way to retrain the brain. And I found a neurologist in Dallas that was practicing. So I took my son and put him through the program. I was impressed. At that point, I had been in ICU once with brain injury. And when I came out of ICU, I was told that you've lost your sense of smell. And quite honestly, those twins were 2 years old. I had to see, I had to hear. I decided I could live with it. But I decided I would try neurofeedback, and guess what? I got my sense of smell back. So that was a life-changing event. And that's when I ended up doing an internship with a neurologist, got board certified in 2005, started my own practice in 2009. And it's amazing how technology has evolved and the capabilities that we have to really study neuroscience.
So I know I'm going to oversimplify something here, but I always look at the brain as like our hard drive. And our hard drive needs to be rewired sometimes if it's not healthy. Am I oversimplifying that?
No, you're not, because anytime most physical stressed out, those neurons and dendrites get out of balance, and it changes the way they're wiring and firing. And they need to be, it's almost like they need to be adjusted. Okay, let's come back into balance. And a lot of times people turn to medication to do that. But there are other ways to do it on a more organic level that will get that brain back into a balanced state.
Okay, so let's just take the here and now. People are out of sorts. They're at home working. They're kind of in the office sometimes. They're hybrid. Some are in the office. All those things, but there's uncertainty. Is uncertainty the greatest catalyst for stress in the brain?
I think so, because uncertainty represents fear, and once we're in that fear state, we get stuck in that fight or flight mode. And 2/3 of the cells in the right hemisphere brain, they're always scanning for danger. Going back in time, our brain's not that totally different than it was when we were in the be eaten days. And so our brain had to scan for danger. Well, it's still doing that today. And we have to really work hard to focus on the brain, because what does the brain remember? Research shows you have 3 times more positive events in your day. What does the brain remember? The one negative. The one person that cut you off, the one person that ran the stop sign in front of you. That's what our brain remembers. So we have to work hard. We have to practice positive psychology to really get that brain to be open to receive and grateful. It's, to me, the simplest thing is, at the end of the day, what are 3 things that you're grateful for? And they're never big things. They're little things.
So you're saying that reprogramming the brain, our natural tendency, or again, the hardwire is to go to the things during the day that we need to still solve. But in truth, and this is a conscious effort we have to make. We have to start with, what am I thankful for? And if you start there, you can handle the other stuff, but you also come out with a sense of gratefulness.
Absolutely, because, on a conscious level, the brain's only capable of taking in a small piece of information. Every second, your brain is capable of taking in 11 million bits of data. Research says that on a conscious level, you can take in between 40 and 126. Well, we don't have to do the math. It all goes to your subconscious level. And that is where, when you can calm that brain down with neurofeedback, with neuromodulation, with practicing gratefulness, positive affirmations. There's so many ways, things that we can do that will hit that subconscious level.
Can you stay on with us for a quick break?
Sure.
I want to ask you about, if we're in charge of our brain, why does it feel like our brain is in charge of us? And is that something that we need to be make a calculated and in a very targeted mission to say, to remind ourselves? Is it that easy to do it, just to say, I'm in charge of my brain's not in charge of me? When we come back, Lee Richardson, this is what she does for a living, study the brain. And how does that play into what employees look for now? I'm not saying our brains are different, but certainly the times they are changing. And we may need to be more conscious of all employees and what they're going through on a daily basis, because everybody's going through something different. We'll visit with her about all of the above when we come back. Welcome back. Mike Maxton, 9 to noon. Lee Richardson is our guest. She spends much of her days trying to study the brain and how it reacts and what we need to know about it. So, Lee, I'm going to use the term panic attack, and that's somewhat generic because it could be anxiety in general. And there's a thought that says, well, you decide what you're going to think about, so think about what you're thinking about, and you decide what your brain. And yet when people get into the mode of anxiety or panic attack, they feel like they no longer have control and there's nothing they can do about it. Why is that, and what can be done?
Well, there's the connection between the brain and the body. That communication on a cellular level has to be kept in balance. And when people get a panic attack, they think they're having a heart attack. A lot of people, not everybody, but most people tell me that they think they're having a heart attack. They feel like they can't breathe, and they feel out of control. And it's that communication between the brain and the body. And we all have self-defeating thoughts. Anytime we find ourselves in a vulnerable position, we start having this negative chit-chat going in our brain. Some of us catastrophize. Anytime the least little bad thing happens, it turns into a catastrophe. So then we don't feel like we're in control of it. We have to learn to really pay attention what's going on in our brain, because what's going on in our brain, the body has to keep score of. And there's a great book, which I didn't write, but the name of it is The Body Keeps Score. And it talks about that interaction. And I think that's why we feel like, because we're feeling physically, mentally, emotionally, we feel like we're not in control.
Why can't we say, though, I am in control? I'm in charge of my brain, and I'm going to choose not to be nervous, anxious, panic attack, anxiety, whatever you want to call it. Why can't we do that? What's the methodology to do that so it puts yourself in control?
Well, when you get in that fight or flight state, your autonomic nervous system that controls your body has two components, and one, the sympathetic, takes over, and it puts you in that fight or flight state. And the simplest thing to do is to focus on your breathing. I recommend that people sit down in a chair, the bottom of your big toes. Those are the reflexology points for the brain. Ground those big toes into the floor. Put your hand on your knees, ground yourself, and focus on taking long, slow, deep breaths. Because when we're talking, I'm probably taking 12 to 14 breaths a minute. I have to say everything I want to say. But my optimal breathing, as well as yours, is somewhere between 4 and 7 breaths a minute. So to really slow down and take those deep, deep breaths and feel that air down around the diaphragm. You should feel some movement in the belly button when you're taking those long, deep breaths. When you change your breath rate, you change your heart rate. And if you can get that breath rate and that heart rate to dance together, you can create heart rate variability. And that's a sign of wellness. So it's, as simple as it sounds to focus on your breathing, it's hard for people to do. People will do it with me in my office. I will give them a little written piece of paper talking about what we did, ask them to practice, and 50% of them at least will not practice on their own.
So that's a practice thing. Now we are now in a stage where there's not as much connection at the office. You're not seeing each other as much in general because so many people are at home or different variations of a hybrid, whatever it is. What is it that companies need to keep an eye on, and what are they responsible for in terms of mental health of their employees?
Well, I think what companies need to keep an eye on is that mental health is brain health. If an employee hurts their leg, the first thing they want that employee to do is go to the doctor, get it taken care of. If the employee calls in and says, I'm just so overwhelmed, I can't come in today, sometimes there's this, negative dialogue. Come on, man, power through, suck it up, buttercup. You can do this. We need you here. So the brain, mental health is brain health, and the brain is an organ just like the heart is. And we've got to put the emphasis that it is. I read the book, Turn Your Brain On to Get Your Game On. And the primary purpose of that was to tell people it is okay to not be okay. And we're all going to be not okay at some point in our lives.
Okay, how about this one? You feel sorry for yourself and you're depressed. And deep down, you really don't have, life is pretty good, but you're having a day like that, etc. Do you just let that play out? And because there's a certain equal balance to that in life, or do you give recommendations as to how to change that state right now?
Well, I recommend that people check in with themselves on a daily basis. Hi, Lee. How you doing today? What do you need? What do you need? Do you need to get out and take a walk? Do you need to feel some sunshine on your shoulders? Have you eaten today? Of something besides coffee? Have you had some good protein? So I think when you check in and you ask yourself what you need, you can put balance back into the body. Again, it's that body-brain connection that is so strong. And if you just kind of let it overwhelm you and take hold of you, then we tend to go in there. We talked about fight or flight, but there's also the freeze state. And when we go to that freeze state, we just want to lay on the floor in that fetal position. Hopefully somebody will throw a blanket over us. And my recommendation is don't go to that freeze state. Check in. Figure out what you need. The brain is 3 pounds. It's 60% water. If you're not keeping yourself hydrated, that's going to have an impact on how well your brain works. And hydration means drinking water.
Lee Richardson is our guest. When you get up in the first thing in the morning, if you can get to grateful state right away, as opposed to, oh man, here we go again, I want to sleep another 15 minutes. Is that a big piece of it? Is how you start the day?
It is for me. I think that different people like to, have a touch point throughout the day. But for me, it is the first thing that I do because it gives me clarity. It gets everything, out of my head. It reminds me of what my purpose is for the day.
Yep. And it gives you real clarity on it. So if you're a boss right now and somebody comes in and they say, I'm not feeling it, I'm overwhelmed, etc. You know, stress is very, very powerful, but we're all going to deal with stress. How do you know when stress has entered that unhealthy zone, as opposed to, you know, some stress is good stress. It gets us going. We hit deadlines because of it. We do lots of good things because of stress. How do you know when it's negative?
Well, when it changes your sleeping patterns, when it changes your dietary, the way that you eat, if you quit eating healthy and you just start eating a lot of sugar or salty snacks, when it leaves you in an irritable state and the way that you interact with your colleagues or your family or your friends is different, then it's in an unhealthy state and you need to get help. You need to do something about it.
Lee, we appreciate it very much. Thank you so much for giving us some time today.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. Lee Richardson talking about something, it's really simple. The brain, huh? Wow.